A day begins at the forge. Close your eyes and imagine a quiet medieval village where the soft glow of fire flickers against stone walls and the rhythmic sound of hammer striking iron gently echoes through the morning air. Tonight, you are stepping into the life of a medieval blacksmith, a world of fire, iron, and simple daily routines that slowly drift you into deep, peaceful sleep. And before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing history stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It truly helps the channel grow and allows more calm stories like this to reach you. Now, take a slow breath and let the story begin. The first light of dawn had not yet reached the rooftops when Thomas stirred awake. Thomas was the village blacksmith, a man known not for wealth or power, but for his steady hands and quiet dedication. His small workshop stood at the edge of the village, where the smell of charcoal and iron lingered even in the cool morning air. He sat up slowly from his wooden bed, the faint chill of the early hour brushing against his skin. Outside, the world was still. No voices, no footsteps, only the distant rustling of wing through the fields. This was his favorite moment of the day. Before the fire, before the noise, before the work began. Thomas dressed in simple wool garments, worn but clean, and stepped outside. The sky above was painted in soft shades of blue and gray, with the first hints of sunrise stretching across the horizon. He walked toward the forge, a small stone structure attached to his workshop. The tools inside waited patiently: hammer, tongs, anvil, each one worn smooth from years of use. To others, these were just tools. To Thomas, they were companions. He began his routine as he always did. First, the fire. He gathered charcoal and placed it carefully into the hearth. Then, with practiced hands, he struck flint against steel. A small spark flickered to life, then another, until finally the fire caught. The flames grew slowly, stretching upward, glowing orange and gold. Thomas watched quietly. There was no rush. There was never a rush. As the fire warmed, he worked the bellows, slow, steady movements, pushing air into the flame. The fire responded, growing brighter, hotter, alive. The forge began to breathe. A deep, rhythmic sound filled the workshop, soft, repetitive, calming. Soon the first sounds of the village began to wake. A distant rooster crowed. Footsteps echoed faintly along the dirt path. Somewhere a door creaked open. But inside the forge, time felt different. Here, everything moved slowly. Everything had a rhythm. Thomas placed a piece of iron into the fire and waited. This was the nature of his work. Not force, not speed, but patience. The iron would change only when it was ready. Minutes passed as the metal slowly heated, turning from dark gray to deep red to glowing orange. Thomas watched carefully, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Then, when the moment came, he lifted the iron with his tongs and placed it onto the anvil, and with a steady motion, he struck. Clang. Again. Clang. Each strike measured, each movement controlled. There was something deeply soothing about the rhythm. Fire, hammer, breath, over and over again. As the sun finally rose above the village, golden light spilled through the doorway of the forge. Dust particles drifted lazily in the air, illuminated by the warm glow. Thomas continued his work, shaping the iron slowly, carefully, without hurry. This was not just labor, this was a craft, a quiet art passed down through generations. And in this simple, steady rhythm, the day had begun. The rhythm of midday work. The morning passed slowly, as it always did in the forge. By the time the sun had climbed higher into the sky, the village had fully awakened. Voices drifted through the air, soft at first, then clearer as the day settled into its steady rhythm. Inside the workshop, Thomas continued his work. The fire had grown stronger now, glowing with a deep, steady heat. The gentle crackling of burning charcoal filled the space, blending with the slow, rhythmic sound of hammer against iron. Clang. Pause. Clang. Each strike echoed softly, never hurried, never harsh. Thomas wiped his hands briefly on the edge of his leather apron, leaving faint traces of soot behind. The warmth of the forge surrounded him, wrapping the room in a quiet, steady heat that felt almost comforting. Outside, the sunlight was brighter now, casting clear shadows along the village path. Midday was approaching. A new customer arrived, this time a farmer carrying a worn iron tool. The edges were dull, the surface marked by years of use. Thomas looked at it carefully, turning it slowly in his hands. There was no need for many words. He understood. This tool was not broken, only tired, and like many things in life, it only needed care. Thomas nodded gently and motioned toward the anvil. The farmer stepped back, watching quietly as the blacksmith returned to his work. The process began again. Fire, heat, time. The iron rested in the glowing heart of the forge. Slowly, patiently, it absorbed the heat, changing color as it softened. Thomas stood nearby, one hand resting lightly on the wooden frame of the bellows. He moved it slowly. In, out, in, out. The fire responded with a quiet breath, growing brighter with each motion. There was no rush in his movements. Every action followed a rhythm, not forced, but natural, like breathing, like the passing of time itself. When the iron was ready, Thomas lifted it carefully and placed it on the anvil. The hammer rose and fell. Clang. The sound echoed again, steady and calm. The farmer watched as the shape slowly returned, edge sharpened, form corrected, strength restored. Outside, the village moved through its own rhythm. Children ran along the dirt paths, their laughter soft and distant. Women carried baskets of grain and cloth. Men worked in the fields, bending slowly beneath the sun. Life continued, simple, steady, and quiet. Inside the forge, the world felt smaller, more focused, more peaceful. Thomas dipped the heated metal into a bucket of water. A soft hiss filled the air as steam rose gently upward. For a moment, everything paused. The sound faded. The motion stopped. And in that brief stillness, there was calm. The farmer stepped forward again, taking the restored tool in his hands. He tested its weight, its edge, its balance. Then he gave a small nod. No grand words, no long conversation, just quiet understanding. Thomas accepted a few coins in return and placed them carefully into a small wooden box. It was not much, but it was enough. The fire continued to burn, steady and alive. Another piece of iron was placed into the heat. Another task began. The rhythm,
never stopped. As the sun reached its highest point, the forge was filled with a warm golden glow. Light and fire blended together, casting soft reflections across stone and steel. Thomas worked on, unhurried, focused, and calm. In this quiet repetition, in this steady flow of simple work, the day moved forward, and the rhythm of the blacksmith's life continued.
The afternoon forge. As the sun climbed past midday, the warmth in the forge deepened. The orange glow from the fire intertwined with the golden sunlight streaming through the doorway. Thomas paused briefly, wiping sweat from his brow, and listened to the faint murmur of life outside. The village had settled into the gentle rhythm of an afternoon. Children laughing in the distance, hens clucking near wooden fences, and the occasional call of a merchant moving along the dirt paths. Inside the workshop, the sound of hammer against iron continued, steady and soothing in its repetition. Each strike echoed the heartbeat of the forge itself. A cart approached, creaking softly along the uneven village road. From it emerged a merchant, carrying several small iron goods wrapped carefully in cloth. He wore a tunic of deep green, slightly faded from travel, and a belt where small pouches held coins and personal items. His eyes carried the weariness of a long journey, but also the quiet excitement of trade. Thomas greeted him with a nod, his expression calm but welcoming. The rhythm of work continued around them, yet there was an unspoken understanding. The forge was a place of quiet diligence, where time moved at the pace of patience. Thomas inspected the items brought by the merchant. Small hinges, iron brackets, and tools, all were functional, yet in need of refinement. The blacksmith's eyes, deep brown and calm, scanned each piece meticulously. One by one, he placed them near the forge, warming each in preparation for shaping. The fire's light danced across the metal, creating a shimmering effect, soft shadows flickering across the stone walls and wooden beams of the workshop. The merchant watched quietly, hands folded, trusting the skill of the blacksmith. The blacksmith raised his hammer, carefully weighing each swing, guiding molten iron with precise strikes. Sparks rose like tiny stars, illuminating the focused expression on his face. Clang, clang, clang. The rhythm never faltered. At one point, Thomas paused, letting the iron rest atop the anvil. He picked up a pair of tongs, moving a particularly stubborn piece closer to the fire. Steam hissed as he cooled another section in a bucket of water. The sound was soft, almost meditative, blending with the gentle creak of the bellows and the distant murmur of village life outside. Hours passed in a steady flow. Villagers occasionally stopped by the forge, either out of curiosity or necessity. Thomas greeted them with a nod or a calm smile, but always returned to his work with unwavering focus. Each tool, each piece of iron was given attention, refined and corrected until it achieved balance and strength. As afternoon began to fade into early evening, the air in the workshop grew warmer, the fire's glow deeper and orange. Shadows lengthened across the floor, stretching from the wooden beams above. Thomas wiped soot from his hands and set down his hammer, taking a moment to breathe and glance at the pieces he had completed. There was a sense of quiet pride, not loud or boastful, but calm and steady, a reflection of a life spent mastering skill through patience and attention. Outside, the village prepared for evening. Smoke drifted from hearths, and the distant sound of animals settling down signaled the close of another day. Inside the forge, Thomas worked until the final pieces were completed, the last hammer strikes echoing like a gentle heartbeat, fading into the rhythm of the day. When he finally leaned back, resting briefly against the wooden frame of the workshop, the sense of fulfillment was quiet but profound. The forge had done its work, Thomas had done his, and the rhythm of life continued, steady and enduring, in the village beyond the walls of the workshop. As the sun began its slow descent behind the distant hills, a softer golden light filled the village. The warm hues of evening combined with the fading glow of the forge fire to create a serene atmosphere. Thomas paused for a moment, leaning slightly on the anvil, listening to the quiet murmurs of the village settling down. Chickens clucked softly, a dog barked faintly in the distance, and the occasional creak of a wagon echoed from the main road. Inside the workshop, the air was warm but not stifling. The rhythm of work that had dominated the day was now replaced by a gentler pace. Thomas carefully inspected the remaining pieces of iron, determining which required one last touch and which were ready for cooling. A young apprentice, William, entered the workshop carrying a basket of freshly swept ash and coal. He was a wiry boy of about 12, with fair skin lightly tanned from playing outdoors, short sandy brown hair, wide curious green eyes, wearing a simple tunic of coarse linen in muted gray tones, and soft leather shoes scuffed from daily use. His expression was attentive but eager, a mix of reverence for Thomas and curiosity about the blacksmith's skill. Thomas nodded at William, silently acknowledging his presence and instructing him through subtle gestures. The apprentice began carefully arranging tools, dusting off surfaces, and replenishing coal in the forge. Each movement was precise yet tentative, reflecting the early stages of learning a craft that demanded patience and respect. The evening progressed slowly. Thomas picked up a small iron bracket, placing it into the glowing forge to heat it, while William operated the bellows under his supervision. Sparks rose from the fire, illuminating their faces and casting dynamic shadows across the stone walls and wooden beams of the workshop. The air smelled faintly of soot and hot metal, mixed with the earthy aroma of wood smoke drifting through the open door. A villager arrived carrying a simple wooden cart filled with small tools in need of repair. Thomas greeted him with a calm nod, gesturing toward the anvil where the work would begin. William watched intently, observing the subtle wrist movements, the way Thomas judged the temperature of the iron by its color, and the rhythm with which he struck the glowing metal. Every detail was a lesson, every movement a story of decades of experience distilled into practice. As twilight approached, the forge's fire glowed brighter against the dimming light outside. Shadows lengthened across the workshop floor, and the village beyond the doorway settled into the calm of evening. Thomas worked steadily, hammering, shaping, and inspecting each piece of iron with meticulous care. William assisted, carefully handling small pieces, holding tongs, and learning the nuances of temperature, timing, and precision. By the time the stars began to peak above the horizon, the workshop had transformed into a scene of quiet accomplishment. Completed tools rested neatly on racks, the forge fire now simmering softly, and both master and apprentice stood back, taking a moment to appreciate the day's labor. The village outside was hushed, yet inside the forge the warmth, skill, and discipline of a day's work lingered in the air. Thomas finally wiped his brow, the fire casting a soft orange glow on his soot-streaked face. William placed the last piece of tool carefully on the rack, their shared glance conveying unspoken understanding. Patience, learning, and craftsmanship were as much a part of this forge as the glowing iron and hammer strikes. Evening had arrived, bringing calm reflection, the quiet satisfaction of hard work, and the gentle rhythm of life in a medieval village forged by skill, dedication, and care.
Morning light spilled across the cobblestone streets of the village as Thomas the blacksmith prepared for another busy day. The forge's fire, rekindled from the previous evening, glowed warmly, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. The rhythmic clanging of hammer on iron had become a familiar song to anyone passing by, but today there was an extra sense of urgency. The village market was opening, and Thomas had promised several villagers that their tools and hardware would be ready for sale. William, the young apprentice, hurried into the workshop carrying buckets of fresh water for cooling the hot iron. His green eyes sparkled with anticipation and energy. Though still learning, his eagerness was infectious, and Thomas could not help but feel proud. The apprentice quickly arranged the tools and coal, setting up the forge for the day ahead. Villagers began arriving with their requests, a farmer needing a new plowshare, a carpenter requesting hammer repairs, and even the baker seeking a stronger iron oven handle. Thomas greeted each with a calm nod, taking the orders down meticulously while William prepared the materials. The forge became a symphony of fire, iron, and sweat, each strike of the hammer accompanied by the hiss of water and the glow of molten metal. As the morning passed, the workshop's warmth blended with the bright sunlight streaming through the open doors. Sparks from the forge flickered upward, catching the light and forming miniature constellations around the busy blacksmith and his eager apprentice. The rhythmic pounding, punctuated by William's careful assistance, created a cadence that mirrored the heart of the village itself, a place where skill, patience, and hard work intertwined. By mid-afternoon, Thomas stepped back to inspect his work. The tools were perfectly shaped, edges sharp, and surfaces smooth. William carefully arranged them on wooden tables for display, his small hands steady despite his youth. A group of villagers approached, drawn by the smell of iron and the shimmer of freshly worked metal. They examined each item, praising the craftsmanship and exchanging coins in gratitude. Between tasks, Thomas found moments to teach William subtler aspects of blacksmithing. He demonstrated how to judge the temperature of iron by its color, the rhythm of hammering for even shaping, and the importance of patience. William watched closely, absorbing every detail, asking thoughtful questions, and gradually developing the calm confidence that only comes from hands-on experience. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the forge slowly quieted. Thomas and William carefully stored the remaining tools and tidied the workshop. Outside, the market had begun to wind down, and villagers returned home satisfied with their purchases. The warm glow of the forge fire illuminated Thomas's soot-streaked face as he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Another day of labor completed, another day of knowledge passed from master to apprentice, and the village itself thrived on the strength of their combined efforts. Evening settled over the village, bringing with it a calm hush. The forge, now dormant, stood as a testament to skill, discipline, and the quiet rhythm of daily life in a medieval community. Thomas finally removed his leather apron, the familiar scent of smoke and iron lingering in the air, and nodded approvingly at William, whose youthful excitement remained undimmed. Together, they had continued a tradition of craftsmanship that would shape the lives and work of their village for generations to come.
The day's bustling activity at the forge had left Thomas the blacksmith weary, but the evening brought with it new challenges. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, villagers still arrived with urgent requests. A farmer needed an iron gate latch repaired before nightfall, a carpenter required extra nails for late work, and a baker was desperate for a replacement oven hook. William, the young apprentice, carried buckets of water and fresh coal while Thomas prepared the forge for the evening tasks. Though tired, Thomas's eyes remained sharp, carefully inspecting each piece of iron before it touched the fire. The apprentice's small hands were steady, holding tongs and arranging tools with meticulous care. Sparks flew upward as hammer met metal, and the warm glow of the forge filled the workshop, blending with the fading twilight outside. Midway through the evening, Thomas faced a particularly difficult task, repairing a broken iron hinge that had been bent and warped. He studied the piece, turning it in his hands, feeling its weight and assessing where to strike. William watched intently, learning not only the technical skill, but also the patience required to judge and act carefully. One misstep, and the iron could crack or deform further. With a steady hand, Thomas heated the metal, hammered it slowly and deliberately, then quenched it in water, steam rising in a soft hiss. As the night deepened, more villagers arrived, some bringing complaints of broken tools from earlier in the day. Thomas and William worked tirelessly, moving from task to task with a rhythm born of experience. Each strike of the hammer, each hiss of quenched iron was a testament to their dedication and craftsmanship. William began to understand the importance of timing and precision. It wasn't just strength, but careful observation and control that made a blacksmith skilled. By the time the moon rose over the village, the forge was quiet again. The remaining tools had been repaired, the last pieces of iron cooled, and Thomas leaned against the anvil, wiping soot from his brow. William, though exhausted, smiled with satisfaction at the day's work, proud of what they had accomplished. The forge glowed softly, embers reflecting in the eyes of both master and apprentice, a symbol of the enduring tradition of skill and labor. The evening air carried the scent of iron, coal, and smoke, blending with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from the baker's nearby shop. Thomas and William cleaned the workshop, stored the tools, and ensured the forge was safely extinguished for the night. The village slept peacefully, unaware of the long hours and careful attention that had gone into ensuring that every tool, latch, and hinge would serve them faithfully.
The first golden rays of dawn crept across the village rooftops, signaling a day unlike any other. Today was the annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of abundance, gratitude, and community. For Thomas the blacksmith and William, it was both a time of excitement and responsibility. Villagers would bring requests for decorative iron pieces, small repairs, and celebratory gifts. The forge, normally a place of steady labor, buzzed with anticipation. Thomas prepared the workshop with care, arranging polished tools and freshly repaired iron ornaments on wooden tables. William moved quickly, sweeping the floor, fetching fresh coal, and ensuring the forge's fire blazed warmly. Sparks from the forge danced in the morning sunlight, streaming through the open doors. The familiar rhythm of hammering and quenching echoed against the stone walls, blending seamlessly with the distant sounds of villagers singing and children laughing in the streets. By mid-morning, villagers began arriving. A farmer brought a small wrought iron gate he hoped to hang in time for the festival's parade. A baker needed a decorative iron stand for festival pies. A tailor requested small iron hooks to hang festive banners along the village square. Thomas worked tirelessly, his hands precise and deliberate, while William assisted, learning how to manage the increased workload without sacrificing quality. The forge became a hub of cheerful activity. Thomas guided William through tasks that required steady hands, careful observation, and patience. Each tool hammered, each piece of iron bent and shaped became part of the festival's preparation. William's eyes sparkled with curiosity and pride as he handled polished pieces of iron, carefully placing them on tables for villagers to collect. The evening promised celebration, yet Thomas reminded William that attention to detail must remain paramount. Every strike mattered, even in the midst of festivity.
As the sun dipped low, Thomas and William paused to admire the colorful banners hung along the village square. The forge glowed with warm light, its windows reflecting the festival lanterns outside. Villagers greeted them with gratitude, offering small tokens of appreciation for the repaired tools and decorative pieces. The apprentice realized that skill, patience, and dedication were not only about labor, they were about the joy and pride that craftsmanship brought to the entire community. With the festival underway, Thomas and William finally closed the forge doors, the day's work complete. Sparks from the final hammering had settled, and the warm glow of the forge mingled with the festival lanterns illuminating the village square. The young apprentice looked up at his mentor, understanding now more deeply than ever the pride in honest work and the legacy of skill passed from master to apprentice. The early morning fog had barely lifted from the village cobblestone streets when the sound of galloping hooves echoed through the square. Thomas and William paused their morning chores, glancing toward the main gate. A traveling knight, clad in steel armor with a well-worn surcoat, approached the forge, accompanied by a small retinue of attendants. His presence brought an air of urgency and excitement. Rare visitors of such stature always brought special requests. The knight dismounted, helmet tucked under his arm, revealing a determined face with piercing blue eyes. He explained he required several reinforced iron fittings for his long journey ahead, including sturdy stirrups, a custom sword hanger, and reinforced hinges for his traveling chest. Thomas, calm yet attentive, nodded and quickly assessed the orders. William's eyes widened with awe at the knight's armor and the prestige of the task. The forge became a hive of focused activity. Thomas demonstrated careful shaping techniques, hammering each piece with precision. Sparks flew from the anvil, catching in the morning light, while William assisted in holding, quenching, and transporting pieces. The rhythm of the hammer, the hiss of water quenching hot iron, and the steady movements of master and apprentice harmonized into a symphony of craftsmanship. As the day progressed, villagers and travelers alike passed by, fascinated by the scene. The knight occasionally glanced at the progress, giving Thomas subtle instructions and advice. William, learning to anticipate his mentor's needs, carefully prepared tools, measured pieces, and watched each strike with growing understanding. Every detail mattered. The safety of the traveling knight depended on the strength and precision of their ironwork. By late afternoon, all orders were complete. The knight expressed gratitude with a respectful bow, leaving generous coins and an offer of future commissions. Thomas and William exchanged satisfied smiles, proud of the skill and dedication displayed. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the forge glowed warmly, and the quiet village streets reflected the peaceful yet industrious day. William realized that every hammer strike, every carefully shaped piece of iron, carried not only function, but also the trust and respect of those who relied on it. The apprentice understood, perhaps more than ever, that mastery was built through patience, observation, and commitment, lessons that would remain with him long after the forge fire dimmed for the evening. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the village as Thomas and William prepared for the annual Festival of Ironwork. This celebration marked the culmination of their hard work over months, displaying the village's skill and creativity in metalcraft. The streets buzzed with anticipation, filled with villagers, travelers, and merchants eager to admire the blacksmith's craftsmanship. Thomas oversaw the arrangement of iron items on tables outside the forge. Decorative hooks, sturdy tools, sword hangers, and artistic pieces gleamed in the sunlight, each reflecting the meticulous labor invested into them. William carefully adjusted the placement of smaller items, ensuring that each piece could be appreciated by the crowd. As the festival commenced, villagers admired the displays, exchanging smiles and words of admiration. Children ran around with wooden toys shaped like miniature hammers and anvils, while older villagers marveled at the complexity of reinforced hinges and ornamental ironwork. Thomas answered questions about techniques, demonstrating the use of hammers, tongs, and quenching water, while William assisted, proud of the knowledge he had gained. A traveling merchant approached, impressed with the quality of the ironwork, requesting several decorative hooks and small household tools for distant towns. The knight from previous episodes returned to admire the craftsmanship, praising the durability and artistry of the completed orders. Thomas and William shared a satisfied glance, knowing their dedication and patience had been recognized by the entire village. By evening, lanterns hung from posts and trees, casting a warm golden glow across the cobblestone streets. Music filled the air as villagers celebrated with food, laughter, and storytelling. William watched Thomas converse with the villagers and travelers, realizing that blacksmithing was not just about crafting iron, it was about forging connections, trust, and respect within the community. The festival concluded with Thomas and William cleaning the forge and safely storing unfinished items, while the glow of the forge fire mingled with the lantern light outside. The apprentice understood that the work of a blacksmith extended beyond skill. It required patience, integrity, and a heart committed to both craft and community. The village lay quiet under the soft glow of dawn as Thomas and William prepared for what would be the final chapter of their long, shared journey in the forge. Years of teaching, hammering, quenching, and crafting had shaped both master and apprentice, forging not only iron, but an unbreakable bond of trust, skill, and knowledge. This morning, Thomas inspected the forge one last time before welcoming the villagers for a special demonstration. The walls carried the faint smell of soot and iron. The anvil gleamed under the gentle morning light, and all tables displayed polished tools, ornate hinges, sword hangers, and decorative ironwork. Every piece told the story of dedication, patience, and craftsmanship. William, now more confident and steady in his hands, arranged the tools while reflecting on how far he had come. He remembered the first day he had arrived at the forge, timid and unsure, and now he carried himself with pride, fully capable of explaining techniques and handling the hammer with care. Villagers, familiar faces from past festivals, and travelers who had admired their work gathered around the forge. Thomas spoke to them about the importance of patience, attention to detail, and respect for craft, while William assisted, demonstrating the delicate steps of shaping iron, quenching, and polishing. The atmosphere was warm, filled with soft sunlight and gentle murmurs of admiration. A young boy, the next generation of the village, watched William intently. Thomas smiled, realizing that his knowledge would live on through this apprentice, just as he had passed it on to William. The demonstration ended with applause, smiles, and nods of approval from villagers and visiting travelers alike. As evening approached, the forge was quiet again, but a sense of fulfillment hung in the air. Thomas and William cleaned the tools, stored the remaining iron, and stood side by side in the doorway, gazing at the village streets bathed in the golden glow of lanterns. William turned to Thomas, saying, "I will carry on your work, master, and teach others as you taught me." Thomas placed a gentle hand on William's shoulder, eyes reflecting pride and contentment. "Remember, William, blacksmithing is not just about making iron, it is about shaping patience, care, and integrity. Pass it on wisely." The night settled over the village,
quiet and peaceful, but the forge remained a symbol of legacy. Through the hands of William and the lessons of Thomas, the art of blacksmithing would continue to thrive, ensuring that the village and its people would always remember the enduring value of craftsmanship, mentorship, and dedication. And so ended the story of Thomas the blacksmith and William the apprentice, an enduring tale of skill, perseverance, and the bond between master and learner.